Welcome to Inside, produced in partnership with Howard University's WHUT. Today we are chatting with Read Medrano, co-founder and executive director of GALA Hispanic Theatre. Rebecca has generously agreed to share some of her experience with us. I'd like to thank you, Rebecca, for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
The GALA Hispanic Theatre. Talk about the GALA Hispanic Theatre and its place within the ecosystem of theater in this city, Washington, D.C.
Well, that's a very good question because we have been here going on 42 years, which is kind of amazing for a culturally specific theater. There's been a French language theater that's come and gone. And we have been very lucky to be rooted in the community that we serve, and at the same time changing and adapting to that community. In 1976, when we were first established, the wave of immigration was quite different. There were political exiles, and they were fleeing dictatorships in their countries, coming to this country for freedom of expression. There were, doctors, lawyers, artists, and we became a little haven for these people to be able to think and to continue to create. We purchased at that time an affordable townhouse in Adams Morgan at 18th and Calorama, and we tore down the walls of a perfectly well-renovated house and created this little café teatro, sort of styled after the Argentinian small theaters. My husband, who's the co-founder, Hugo's from Argentina. And we had incredibly political, socio-political work there. We just attracted all of these people who had no other place to go. Then things kind of began to change. First of all, that neighborhood became gentrified. We had a lot of threats. It was a changing population, and we were offered the opportunity to go down to where the Shakespeare is now in the Landsberg building. And there was an effort to make that a community art space. That effort with the the Pennsylvania Avenue Development Corporation eventually folded, but we did have a theater there for a while. We then lost that space, came uptown again to our stomping grounds, and discovered the Sacred Heart School at Park, close to where we are now. And the nuns were not using the auditorium, so we said, fine, we'll take it over. And we were there 18 years.
Create art in a church
in a church setting, in a church institution, and it was very low rent. And flash forward to 2000, they decided, the Archdiocese, not to rent the theaters anymore. We went back downtown to the warehouse across from the convention center temporarily while we raised money to renovate the Tivoli. We'd always had our eyes on it because we live in that neighborhood and it had been boarded up for so long. So we were delighted. In the terms of the audience and the changing demographics, of course, most of the newer immigrants are from Central America, and they're here for economic reasons. A harder audience to reach because they don't have the theater experience. But we've adapted our program to do a cross-section of programs that we believe is in the interest of the broader Latino and non-Latino audience.
So what I find so interesting about that story is there are certain through lines. The through line of art, of the importance of art to anyone, to anyone's life, and by thinking about that through line, it allows you to shift, because as your audience shifts, as your community shifts, you always have the art.
Absolutely. And I think also, kind of without knowing it, because we were all very young then, we were the youngsters starting the theater, by doing GALA, which is not a party, it's a grupo de artistas latinoamericanos, that's pan-American. So imagine the numbers of cultures that are already included that. You have the Caribbean Afro-Latino culture, you have the Andean cultures, you have the indigenous, you have the European cultures of Chile and Argentina. You have this wide scope, which is so enriching in terms of what you choose to program. I mean, we did a Caribbean show that brought out, a Trinidadian show, and Trinidad was had a Spanish culture there as well. And we did it in patois, French, Spanish, and English, with an amazing group called Three Canal that it has a music program. And it was just incredibly popular here. So it's not just, Spanish, Latin America, it's pan-American.
Talk about how you reach decisions as to what you present, and what are the attributes of the playwrights whose works that you present?
That's also a wonderful question. It's always a challenge establishing a season, especially now that we have a larger space with more fixed expenses, more staff. When you're a smaller sort of everybody egalitarian group where everybody made $10,000 or whatever it was, it was easier. We could do more risky things. Now we have to do things that are going to draw audiences. So we try to combine it with new works. We do a lot of commissioning now. New works that will appeal. This one now is a resident and playwright from Venezuela. We were the first to start doing his shows in 1980s, and now he's hot internationally. It's a very first time that this show is being produced, and it's about social media, which is an all-encompassing theme. So it's in Spanish with English, but the theme is universal.
And the themes are the damage that social media can inflict on people.
Exactly. And interestingly enough, we thought, because in some of the social media it talks about sexting, which doesn't happen here, this is sort of a provocative. We thought the schools would sort of balk at that. We're sold out for the student matinees. I think the teachers are having problems with the social media intent of the students, bullying, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a great opportunity for students to come. We have really, I think our bread and butter now is the matinees that we do for 3 out of the 4. We can't do it in the June show because the schools are out. But for the year up to June, we do shows that will appeal to students. We don't make that our only choice, but I push heavily for the artists to try to do ones that students can see. There are some more adult themes that we do in June, but really we feel it's important that they get introduced to this culture, to this literature. It's a challenge for another reason in that the playwrights, back in the 70s and 80s, there was a boom of very socio-political theater in Latin America, and we loved doing that. We did that. That's dropped off. So what you have are, what is known here are the novelists, the boom novelists, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Vargas Llosa. So those plays have been adapted, but only by 1 or 2 writers. The rights are very hard to get now, and so when we do those, it's always sold out. We combine one of those with a newer play like this that may not draw as much audiences. And recently we've been commissioning musicals. We went out on a limb and we thought we were going to go broke, but luckily we filled the houses with In the Heights in Spanish, which had, of course, a wide appeal and was a great show to do.
Talk about your education and public programs and how you interact with the schools, because the schools, particularly the public schools, don't have any money for the arts anymore, and it's the first thing that gets dropped.
Right. We have just recently, the last, I would say 5 or 6 years, really grown the school programs by putting somebody in charge of the outreach and making sure that we keep up with the list of teachers, that we actually go to the schools, we talk to the teachers. It is hard for them to put aside money. There is something called the DC Arts and Education Collaborative, and we are a member. They're helping bring those schools who can't afford to come on field trips by underwriting the cost of the tickets. So that's part of what we do, and they provide buses. But there's such a hunger, and there's so many, non-Latino parents want their kids in immersion schools. So they don't even want the ballet, they want to hear everything in Spanish. So we have a great opportunity there. And I would say, we worked with more than 40, 50 elementary and high schools, throughout the year, and they come, some of them repeat times, which is unusual. They get more than one field trip. But there's a lack of resources, and they have such large Latino student bodies that this is work that's relevant to their families, to their culture. Great example is the hardest sector of the population to bring to the theater is the largest Latino sector, Salvadorans. They have a great history of visual art, but of course the 12-year Civil War, caused largely by our actions, had destroyed the theater. And the writing stopped, the creation stopped. They're still recovering. So they don't come to the theater. We have this outreach. We have a Salvadoran-born playwright who wrote a children's play called Volcanes about the myth of the volcanoes. I didn't know this. There are these mad dogs called cadejos who protect the Salvadorians when the earthquakes erupt, and they protect them when they go abroad. Of course, all those people here. I had no idea that all of these kids know these myths. When we did this show, and we brought a lot of elementary schools, the post-performance discussion, the moderator's like, well, do you have any questions? I'm from El Salvador. Oh, yeah, wonderful. And the question, I'm from El Salvador. And they all started, and we just finally said, how many? And the whole class. And my grandmother told me this story, and I remember this story. So it's a wonderful way of connecting them to that culture.
So talk about your performers. Where do you find your artists?
So we have a group of local artists that we've had from, some of them from the very beginning have stayed with us, who are bilingual, who work at other theaters. And then when we don't find a particular person, we also do international exchanges. We have a great ongoing exchange with these two guys in Spain who work with young artists, and they've come now 6 times. And every time their shows have been nominated for Helen Hayes. Very interesting work. They work quite differently because they're the designers, directors, and actors work like 8 hours a day from the beginning of. They don't bother with union regulations. You have to have rest time. So they're great. We bring some artists from Spain through them. We have an exchange with Mexico. We brought a lead Mexican artist. We have a great exchange with this guy, Gustavo Ott, the playwright. When we brought him, he had a theater in Venezuela that's still going, amazing with the current crisis, called Teatro San Martin. And when we need artists, we reach out to them as well. So moving up to now we have to get everybody visas, because before you could do cultural exchanges with a letter from the ambassador or embassy saying they're here for a cultural program.
And then that takes time, and it takes money.
Now
and
it takes time and money and energy, so everybody's got to have a working visa, so it's getting harder and harder. But it's a wonderful pool, and it also is a great experience because the artists who come here take something home with them, and our artists gain all of these skills from working with people internationally.
And you've been recognized internationally as well. You've received the DC Mayor's Award for Excellence in Service to the Arts, the Order of Queen Isabella II, conferred by the King of Spain, Juan Carlos I, and the Founders Award of the Cultural Alliance of Greater Washington. The fact is that people who have experienced your art, who have benefited from your art, from the art of your organization, recognize the unique contribution it makes to the quality of life of children, of adults, of people in this DC region. It's really wonderful to behold how your sensibility and your husband's sensibility as young people, this idea of going over, around, through any obstacle, how that has taken form today. And I know that there are still challenges. What's the future hold for the
There
organization?
are a lot of challenges in the past. I mean, I take my hat off to Ugo because he rose above, it happens with any ethnic theaters or such where people want to pull each other down, and we get in the community because we're both a professional theater, but we're community organizers. And he just would soar above it. And I'm like, no, let's, those people can't say that about us. We're not elitists. We're not communists. We're, theater people. And he just plowed ahead. And we both do. We both, it's work.
You compliment each other?
Compliment. And then Abel Lopez has been great. He's been with us for 35 years. And he's actually head of arts right now in Americans for the Arts. And so he's got an outreach nationally and an eye out there and is directing this show. So, but the challenges are many. There's always the funding challenge. There's always the challenge of personnel and growth. It's very hard to get general operating funds. Everything is like education, which is great because we have a great education program, but we need more than that. And we need staff money. We need to expand. We're still only 8 people doing all of these programs, and that's just too little. But it's always uplifting. I mean, I wouldn't have done anything else in my life at all. When I once complained, my stepmom said, well, you could be bored and have married a dentist. And I said, well, This, people come to us now in our Three Kings celebration, for example, which is a free community thing we do in January 6th for Dia de los Reyes. Kids who came when they were kids are now parents bringing their kids to that. So it makes me feel old but happy, right?
Well, Rebecca Medrano, I cannot see you being bored and marrying a dentist. Thank you so much for sharing.
It was a
your
pleasure.
Insights,
Come
and
see
thank
the show.
You.
Be our guest. We love Howard University too.
Executive Director of GALA Hispanic Theatre. Go visit.
Thank you so much.